Non-Monogamy Help is a podcast where your questions about open, non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships are answered. Our host, Lola Phoenix, will consult a licensed therapist with over a decade of experience to address your problems. Names and locations have been changed or censored to keep your questions anonymous. You're listening to Non-Monogamy Help, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 48 of the Non-Monogamy Help podcast. I'm Lola Phoenix. Please send your questions to nonmonogamyhelp@gmail.com and they'll either be read in the podcast or the column anonymously. If you want to read the columns and listen to the podcast, you can go to nonmonogamyhelp.com. Subscribe to our newsletter by going to go.nonmonogamyhelp.com/email, and you can follow us on Twitter at nonmonogamyhelp. If you want to support the columns and the podcast, please consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month helps support the daily running of the columns and the podcast and just shows me a general vote of support, which I really appreciate. You can do that by going to patreon.com/Lola Phoenix. If you donate $5 or more a month, your name, with your permission, will be read at the end of the podcast. Let's get to this week's discussion question. If this is the first time you're hearing this, every week before I read the letter, I put forth a discussion question that you can use with your friends, partners, or anyone else to get to know them a little bit more. I also answer it myself briefly to give you a little bit of context. So this week's discussion question is, what is your love language? So if you don't know what love languages are, I think it's a little bit useful. I think that sometimes, I haven't investigated it myself, so I can't say for sure, but I have heard not so great things about the people who started the love language concept. But I do think love languages are really, really helpful for people because it explains how people like to give and receive love and what kind of people prioritize, and it's related to this week's question. So I think my love language is, I think I express love as acts of service. That's probably the most easiest way that I express love. Whether it's friendships or relationships, generally speaking, I will do stuff for people that I care about to make their lives easier. And I think that I probably appreciate acts of service as well. I think gifts are my least interested love language. No. Actually, my love language is quality time. So that's really, really important for me. I have to have some type of quality time with someone, or I have to feel like they are choosing me in some way. That's really, really important for me. So yeah, that is the answer to my side of the question. I'm going to repeat it again. The discussion question this week is, what is your love language? All right, let's get to this week's letter. I've been in a relationship with my husband, A, for about 12 years. Initially, we started off in an open polyamorous relationship back when we didn't know the term. At the time, he was polyamorous and seeing 2 other women in addition to myself. Even though I was allowed to see others, I felt myself only wanting him, and therefore assumed I was monogamous. At one point, I told him kindly that I would likely need to leave the relationship because it was hurting me too much that we were not exclusive, not blaming him at all, but because he was completely honest about who he was. At that point, he told me he didn't want to lose me, and that he would try monogamy. We were then monogamous together for a few more years, after which time I developed an intense crush on someone, B, at work, who I almost ended my relationship over. Now I know that was NRE, which is New Relationship Energy. My crush on B was mostly an emotional relationship with some physical involvement with A's subsequent permission. Too many details, but A and I briefly decided to open up our relationship, at which point A immediately found a part-time girlfriend. At the time, I convinced myself I had a crush on B because A wasn't ready to marry me, and therefore didn't feel loved enough. A gave me a choice to either stay in the relationship or leave to be with B. I chose to stay with A and work on distancing myself from B to try and get over my feelings. Also, B, though also having intense feelings for me, was not looking to settle into anything serious in that moment, and was only confused about what he wanted. B also had a lot of other emotional issues he was going through at the time, and it would have been a very unstable relationship, and I knew I still loved A. After deciding to stay together with A, things went well. We remained in a good relationship together, we got married, and at least on my end, I felt generally happy. We had some issues. One that kept repeating itself is that my love language is through words. And for as long as we have been together, it's hard for me to feel emotionally reassured and supported by A when I'm dealing with something stressful or upsetting. Although I find he is really trying, it is difficult for A to comfort me without getting defensive or telling me he feels attacked because my voice sounds angry or upset, even though I'm upset about something that has nothing to do with him. After a lot of thinking, I realized, though B was not an emotionally stable man, that comforting me when I felt upset was something that he had kind of been able to do. Moving forward about 3 years after A and I got married, we settled down for another traveling gig in a new town, and several months into my new job, I found myself developing a crush on my coworker, C. This time it was different. I was shocked with myself. I couldn't understand it. This time there was no excuse. A had given me everything I had wanted and asked for. He was committed. He was monogamous. He had married me. He was so good for my family, or so good with my family. I still loved him. I knew that. And yet I found myself falling deeply in love with C. He returned my feelings. He was married. We both worked very hard on trying to remain just friends, no matter what our feelings were. I even tried to coordinate couples dates with me and A and C and his wife. A was very agreeable, but C's wife kept on giving excuses for why they couldn't hang out with us, so it never happened. After a year and a half of holding back, I felt I didn't want to hold back anymore. I was so in love with C and I didn't want to lose the chance. I kissed him at work and some physical involvement as well, so yes, I cheated. I was planning on eventually telling A. A few months into the affair, A asked me, and I told him the truth. In all fairness, I should have spoken to A, and I do take full responsibility for the cheating. It was wrong, and at the time I was so scared he'd tell me I'd have to choose, like what happened last time, and my new relationship energy was so strong I felt I wouldn't be able to bear it and would have to leave A. Well, A was understandably hurt, but literally about less than 48 hours later, he tells me he has a realization that we should go back to being polyamorous. After all, he was polyamorous already, had known about that for himself for years, and I was obviously not doing well with monogamy. I still feel A should have yelled at me, punished me, been upset with me for longer. I deserved it. I admit I'm still having a hard time forgiving myself for my affair, even as I write this. Well, A restructured into polyamory quite quickly. Within several months, he had a few new girlfriends. Those were serious relationships with women he deeply cared for, not casual encounters. This is who he is. Later, A explained to me that he had been very unhappy for the last few years and had felt himself becoming more emotionally distant as a result. A does admit he believes some of what drew me to C is that C was a strong, emotionally supportive friend who was there for me for over a year when A had been emotionally distant. A is still so thankful I met C and that C was there for me during that time. So after A found out about the affair, I spoke to C, who was adamantly opposed to polyamory, not because he judges it, but because he doesn't believe it's for him. Initially, he attempted to leave his wife, telling her he wanted to be with me, but later he went back to her when he found out that I had no intention of leaving my husband. He tried to bring up polyamory with his wife, who declined it, and gave him an ultimatum that he had to choose between her and me. C admitted to me later that he had initially left his wife because he was hoping I might choose him and leave my husband. To be clear, C didn't want to pull me away from A, but was hoping that maybe I'd realize he was a better choice for me and that maybe A and I were growing apart. C never gave me an ultimatum. He has a kind heart and told me he would have worked on being happy for me if I chose A and was happy with A. But he had difficulty with the concept of polyamory. After discussing the option of polyamory, C asked me to wait because he wanted to try and learn more and consider whether he could open himself up to the idea. Initially, he dived in, began reading books, going on polyam blogs, talking of a potential polyam future with me, but after a few months, he stopped, not really explaining why, other than to say he was busy with all this other stuff in his life and didn't have time, and that he still was processing things. During this time, we have been seeing each other secretly. His wife doesn't know, although I've repeatedly told him he should tell her. My husband A knows everything. Actually, A and C have met and like each other. Though they aren't friends, they get along. A is comfortable. C has never quite felt comfortable and always worries he is in the way of my marriage with A. It has been about 18 months total of me waiting, basically me putting my life on hold, for C to process what he wants. It's not that C told me I couldn't date anyone else, but he did say that if I began seeing someone new, he would have an emotionally difficult time starting a new relationship with me, and may have to really leave. He's obviously okay with me continuing to see A. So I've been seeing A, and I'm seeing C in secret because he hasn't told his wife, and because of this dynamic, I barely get to see him, just briefly for a few hours once or twice a week when his wife is at work, and it's so hard that I've given myself a deadline that I've told him about where I will eventually need to leave because it hurts too much, coming second to his wife all of the time, not getting to really even date, no overnights, limited phone time, mostly texting. I won't go into this part in detail, but C's wife, as per C's description, is controlling in many ways, does not treat him respectfully, and keeps him away from his kids from his previous marriage, forcing him to choose. During this time, my husband A has developed several significant relationships with 3 other women, and also developing some relationships with a few others that are yet undetermined status. Our relationship has shifted. We are no longer a couple in a primary relationship with secondary relationships. He considers himself egalitarian polyam and solo polyam, and I am now one of several partners he loves. I only see him about 1 to 2 days a week, so we have maybe a day date together in one evening. Occasionally we have a bit more time when one of his girlfriends is out of town. He has even had his own apartment. He is subletting where he goes occasionally. And he has moved into the spare room in our apartment so that our relationship is no longer like a couple and more suited to dating. Though we are dating about once a week, our situation at home in our apartment is more like roommates. This has been very difficult for me because I was used to seeing A all the time, every day. I know I still love him and that he still loves me, even though I have been having the affair with C. The concepts of polyamory is still very new to me, and I struggle with a lot of insecurity and things I'm working on with myself. I do have emotional outbursts intermittently, and I'm still processing through multiple monogamous concepts. I'm trying to restructure my mind. I'm learning as I go, and I do believe I'm slowly making progress, identifying where my insecurities lie. I do believe seeing an individual polyam-friendly therapist would be good for me. As I explained before, A has always had a difficult time emotionally supporting me when I'm upset, so this has caused a large strain on our relationships over the last 6 months, especially if I'm upset because of something he is doing, and I'm still working on creating a polyam-friendly support group. For a while, A was one of my only emotional supports, and that's a large burden to place on A. It got so bad that we separated for a couple weeks, and I was almost ready to leave him, but then I realized I still love A so much and don't want to give up our relationship yet. But 1 to 2 days a week is not enough for me. I enjoy being a couple. It's what I would want. I think I'm polyamorous, still not quite sure, but not a solo polyam. It's important for me to have quality time in my relationship to develop intimacy I need. I need more time in a relationship than 1 to 2 days a week, but this is all A can give me at this point. And I do have to add that everything that's going on with C, he is able, more than any man I have been with, to emotionally comfort me and reassure me when I'm upset. It is a need I never really had met until I met C, and it's a need that's very important to me. So my dilemma is this: I love A and C, they both love me. Ideally, I'd love to be with both of them. C has similar values and life goals to mine. Ideally, I'd love for him to be a primary partner with me in terms of living together, time spent together, and for A to be my secondary partner. A is cool with that, C is not. After 18 months of processing, C is still not sure if he can handle polyamory. The idea of me possibly meeting future men upsets him. He is still not even sure he can share me with A. Though A and I have gone in very different directions since we became polyam, I still love him, and I don't want to leave him right now. I feel I may regret it and possibly end up resenting C for it later on. Ideally, I'd want a fully polyamorous relationship that is non-exclusive, but I am willing to compromise on a closed triad. Well, A would be fully polyamorous, but I would be exclusive with A and C only, and C would be exclusive with me, and his wife, if she wants to continue seeing him. I have never asked C to choose between me and his wife. Part of me still wonders if I'm truly polyamorous, or whether my need for emotional support and comfort and reassurance was just not met in my relationship with A. Would I be happy with C alone, or am I polyam? At this point, I'm planning on ending my affair with C because I can't go on barely getting to be with someone I deeply care about, and I don't feel good that his wife doesn't know. I feel she and I deserve more respect in our relationships, not that he is intentionally disrespecting us. He just knows that if he tells her, he'll have to lose her, and he loves us both, though he says he's pretty unhappy with her and prefers to be with me. At the same time, I'm not sure if I should just give C what he wants: monogamy, 24/7 exclusive relationship. I don't want to lose him, and he is willing to offer me things that A is not. If I stay with A and lose C, I end up with a relationship where I only get to date A 1 or 2 days a week. Is that the kind of relationship worth giving C up over? And at this point, I'm still really high on new relationship energy with C. I feel so in love with him, and the idea of letting him go overwhelms me. But I know I can do it, but it will hurt so much. But I love A, don't want to leave him. He's been such a good man to me over the past 12 years. I still think we have potential. Any advice on what I should do? Before I get to my response to this week's letter, I want to make sure I do one little plug that supports the podcast. A lot of my advice involves encouraging people to seek therapy, and that can be hard. You can't always find a therapist that's near you. Sometimes they're not polyamory friendly, sometimes they're not LGBT friendly, sometimes they're not whatever kind of identity that would help you feel more connected to them. It can be really, really hard to find a therapist that gets you. And if that's the case, you can't find a therapist in your immediate area, then you can try BetterHelp. BetterHelp is an online platform where you can find a therapist and chat to them online, send them messages, and you know, it's a lot simpler sometimes than face-to-face therapy. You could be like me and really struggle to get to a therapist's office. And BetterHelp does also offer some financial support options if traditional therapy isn't affordable for you, and that's another reason you haven't pursued therapy. So if you want to try it, support the podcast, you can go to betterhelp.com/non-monogamy help, no hyphens, and you can get 10% off of your first month. And why not? Give it a try. Now, let's get to my response to this week's letter. The first thing that I would say with this is that one thing that I've kind of repeated a lot in the columns and in the podcast occasionally is that polyamory isn't about having multiple unfulfilling relationships. It's supposed to be about having multiple fulfilling relationships. And I sometimes feel like people choose polyamory not because they're actually interested in polyamory, but because they don't want to break up with someone. And I don't really think that that's the same thing. Like, you shouldn't use polyamory as an excuse to stay with people who aren't really meeting your needs. And that's kind of what I feel like you've done with A for a very, very long time. A clearly is not really capable of giving you the emotional support you need, and I think you can deal with that if you don't have to rely on A. But I still think that the fact that A reacts so badly to you being emotional about things that do involve him is a little worrying. Because even if you only have a secondary quote-unquote relationship, you still may have issues, and you still may have things that you need to discuss, and it's going to be really hard for you to actually discuss them if, A has this kind of reaction to you being emotional. And that might be worth working on with each other. And I don't know, like, it's far be it from me to say when someone else has too many partners, but the fact that he has, like, so many people that he has to focus on, it just makes me wonder, like, what the deal is with that. And people can have multiple partners and lots of different partners, and doesn't reflect anything. But sometimes I do think that sometimes people choose polyamory because it means that they don't have to emotionally support anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they're just a secondary, quote unquote, to everybody, and they don't have to live with anyone, and they don't have to be a primary or any kind of an emotional support to anyone, then they can get away with not being able to emotionally support anyone. And I think that that's okay, but I do think that that merits some kind of communication, and I worry that there hasn't really been a situation where A has sat you down and said, look, you need this, and I can't provide this. And that's a little worrying, because even if you are to date A as a secondary, he still, you can't even tell him right now that 1 to 2 days is not enough for you, because he reacts so poorly and feels attacked every time you bring something up. So it's like, you have to be, regardless of how often you see somebody, you have to be able to tell them if they're not meeting your needs. You have to be able to have difficult discussions. It's really, really funny, because I actually spoke to my therapist about, if you're listening to this right now I'm recording this, we're in a pandemic, so we're in lockdown, and with my partners, like, with my domestic partner that I live with, obviously we're around each other 24/7, and that causes a lot of friction in a lot of ways. And because we've been bickering so much, that has sort of signaled in my head a panic kind of thing, and has made me go, oh my god, we're bickering, we're gonna, because I'm used to big family arguments ending up in something huge and dramatic happening. I'm used to a family argument ending with someone getting kicked out. So for us to bicker, I'm not really used to that, and it really, really throws me off. And so, but my therapist actually said, like, look, if you go in a whole relationship without ever arguing, sometimes arguing gets your feelings out, and it helps you work through things, and you become stronger together because you argue, it doesn't weaken things. And it makes me wonder, like, if you can't argue with A, if you can't bring things up, if you can have a disagreement because every time you bring something up, he's like, oh, you're attacking me, that doesn't bode well for any kind of relationship with him. And that's kind of a worry. And I do kind of wonder if this is what you're actually, this is what's happening to you. You are basically, in this relationship and keeping it open and seeking other partners because you feel lonely and because you're not getting the things that you need emotionally. So that is something that you really need to think about, because, you are incompatible in a lot of ways. The second thing, though, is that you're making C out to be a lot nicer than he is. You say he's not intentionally doing this. He is intentionally doing this. Like, he is intentionally choosing to cheat on his wife with you. He is. And he doesn't have the sort of ability to state his needs with his wife either. He is not able to accept the fact that two people, even if they're married and even if they love each other and care for each other, can be incompatible. And it's like, I'm almost heavily annoyed with C, because he's such a massive hypocrite. He doesn't want you to be polyamorous. Basically, he is dictating to you, whether or not you say, well, people don't have to specifically say you're not allowed to date other people if they create a situation where you feel unsafe or you feel like you can't. Like, that's the thing. Like, he is basically making a situation where you can't pursue anybody else. He's fine to cheat on his wife, but he has a problem with consensual, ethical, open relationships. And like, I'm not saying he has to be polyamorous, and I'm not saying he has to be okay with it, but it is very hypocritical for him to be in a situation where basically he's allowed to cheat, but you can't have another ethical relationship because he will have a problem with that. He's not as great as you're making him out to be. Like, he may be great at emotionally comforting you, and to be honest, like, that's not a high bar. Like, all due respect to you, all due respect to A, all due respect to the situation, someone being able to comfort you in when you are upset is not like there's another podcast that I recorded early about gold medals. Go listen to that. It's not like so many people are in situations, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's usually women who are in situations with men, who are in relationships with men, where the man does something very, very basic that should be expected in a romantic relationship, and the woman is like, oh my god, he's so amazing. He's just so amazing. He does such a... No, he's doing what he fucking should when he's in a relationship, which is being there for his partner. That's not a gold star. That is the lowest freaking bar in the world. So, yeah. Stop. It's probably your new relationship energy, even though you've been in this situation for 18 months. It is definitely you've got some rose-tinted glasses on when it comes to C, probably because he comforts you so well, but he's not all you think he is. Because if he was really an emotionally responsible person, he would go, And this whole bullshit about, like, his wife is really mean to him or whatever. Anytime a man slags off his ex, think about that situation. Okay, I'm not denying that maybe his wife isn't that great, and that may be the situation. Then why is he there? So, no, like, come on, think about this for a minute. Like, you cannot have someone who is emotionally responsible and is going to be there for you, and you're giving him all these excuses and saying, oh, he's lovely and he has a kind heart and he just doesn't want to leave his wife because he loves her, but he does want to be with me, but she's really bad and he does really want to. That's such a lie. If it's not a lie, it's such a fucking cop-out. Like, come on. If their relationship is that bad, and if he really doesn't want to be with his wife, then why is he fucking there? Why is he there? What is his freaking excuse? 18 months? Come on. No. And, like, you're basic. Here's the thing. If you are monogamous, and let's just put aside the polyamory for a situation. If you are monogamous and you are dating, and I know that people cheat for a lot of different reasons, and it can be complicated, and I get it. Generally speaking, though, if you are monogamous and you are cheating on someone with someone, what that tells you about that person who you are cheating with, even though A knows that you're with C and is fine with it, but C's wife doesn't know, he is okay with cheating. He is okay with non-ethical behavior. He is okay lying to his wife, and it stands to reason that if he's okay lying to his wife, he's okay lying to you. Like, and it means that if your relationship goes sour, or for whatever reason it doesn't work out, then he's fine lying to you. Like, you're not special in that. He might say that, but you really, 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 really need to not believe that, because, yeah, it's just not a good situation. He's not as great as you're making him out to be. He may be great at emotionally validating you, but once again, that is not an extreme relationship skill. That's just a basic thing. And he probably knows that and is using that a bit to his advantage. So that's one thing. The other thing that really concerns me about A that I need to mention is that your relationship changed. He decided he's ethical, solo polyam, and now you only see him 1 to 2 days a week. Where's the fucking conversation about that? Like, I totally get that people can explore polyamory and come to find out that different situations suit them better, and actually I don't really want to be in a primary relationship, I actually want to have more freedom, and that's fine. That is absolutely fine, but a discussion needs to be had. And why hasn't A sat you down and said, hey, look, I'm not feeling this primary situation. Like, it just seems like all this sort of just slowly happened to you, and there was just no discussion, and now you only see A 1 to 2 days a week, and it's just, I mean, it's not to say that, like, it's not to say that you necessarily would then go, well, I don't want this, and A would go, oh, okay, let's stay primary then. But at least if he had some kind of discussion with you, then you would be able to go, I'm not cool with that. Like, 1 to 2 days a week isn't great for me. And maybe you could have, like, I don't know, slowly, you could have gone from 6 days a week to 5 days a week to 4 days. Like, it could have been a little easier on you, especially since A doesn't even emotionally support you very well in general anyway. But instead, he's just sort of, and I don't know how fast this happened, like, if it was just like, one day he was like, oh, I'm gonna move into the second room and blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, you gotta have a kind of discussion about it. And he's not had any kind, like, how is that ethical? How is it ethical to just slowly, completely pull away from your partner without really addressing it or talking about it? So that's not great, like, for any kind of relationship. So, yeah, I think you are in a bit of a situation, and I wish that I had something better to advise, because I feel like even if you sit down and have a conversation with A and say 1 to 2 days a week isn't cutting it for me, I don't think A is wanting to give you any more. I don't think that's going to fix that situation. You can absolutely leave C, but you're just going to leave C. He's not going to dump his wife for you. And even if he does, you are in a situation where he does have a problem with you being with A. Like, he does. Even though he's okay with it right now. He does have a problem with it. And he's going to want you to dump A. He is going to want that. And then he's going to bring up the fact that he dumped his wife for you. So, like, don't pull the fucking wool over your eyes and realize that that's what's going to happen if he did dump his wife. He would then immediately expect you to dump A. I doubt... heavily doubt that he will be okay with you being with A in any context. Even if you only saw A 1 to 2 days a week, he'd never be okay with it. So, and you say, oh, well, maybe I could go 24/7 do monogamy with C, but the thing is, you'd be doing monogamy with somebody who cheated. And it's not really what you want. Like, that... like, I'm not saying that, like, people, like, once a cheater, always a cheater, or anything like that. Like, people cheat for all sorts of different reasons. It can be really complicated, but at the same time, if he's not even acknowledging the fact that what he's doing is wrong, I don't think that would be a good situation for you to be in. Especially because if you just happen to fall in love with another coworker, there ain't no way C is ever going to hear of it. If you do find out that you are more polyamorous than you think you are, you're kind of screwed in that regard. So, yeah, I think that the thing that you need to do is be comfortable being alone. Unfortunately, I think that you need to dump C immediately. Like, cheating is not polyamory. What you're doing isn't polyamory. I'm sorry. Cheating is not polyamory. You are helping C cheat, which isn't polyamory. It's unethical. It's wrong. You shouldn't do it. Even if you love C so much, I get that, but it's wrong. So you need to dump him. Like, you need to make him choose. Sometimes making someone choose isn't a bad thing. It's not always controlling and bad. Sometimes when you say, actually, you need to choose because if you don't, it's unethical, and I'm not going to participate in that. So giving him an ultimatum isn't a terrible thing. It doesn't make you a terrible person. It just makes you a person with self-respect and dignity. So do that. Get rid of C. I don't even think you should continue dating him. I think even if he dumped his wife for you, I mean, ask him. I guarantee you anything. If you say, oh, if you dump your wife, he's going to go, oh, well, then you dump A. Like, that is going to be what it is. Like, honestly. So I just think you should just get rid of C. I get that he's emotionally supportive, but what you need out of this situation is to learn how to be alone. Because especially if you're going to be polyamorous, you can't always have, it's not Pokemon, it's not Polymon, it's not picking as many people and avoiding being alone by having as many partners as possible. Sometimes you are alone. Sometimes you have to be comfortable being by yourself and being alone and being fine with that. You need to be more comfortable being alone. You need to let go of the expectation that A is going to give you the emotional support that you want. That's just not going to happen. And I think if you focused more on yourself, maybe see a therapist if it's accessible to you for yourself, find ways to gain emotional support through yourself, through therapy, through your friendship network, because that's the thing, that polyamory is not just about, usually, it's not just about multiple romantic relationships. It's also, many people feel like polyamory opens them up to seeing all relationships as equally valid. So your friendships are also important relationships that should also be valued, and that should also, romantic relationships don't necessarily mean so much more than friendships. So your friends can emotionally validate you. Can you accept and receive emotional validation and help through your friends? Does it always have to be somebody that you're sleeping with or that you're romantic with? So that's what you need to focus on. Get rid of C. Get rid of C completely. And you could keep A, but you need to let go of the expectation that A is going to be like C. There are other stuff to work on with A, like whether or not you keep A around, like, I don't know, I do kind of feel like if you are in a relationship with someone who is unwilling to listen to you, or you can't actually talk to him about anything, like, even a friend should somewhat be able to emotionally validate you. And that's why I feel like if you had better friends, you would actually be like, actually, fuck A. Because sometimes, and I've had that situation before, where I have been in a partnership that I thought was fulfilling, and then I had friendships, and I was like, actually, my friends are being more supportive than my partner is. So why am I with this person? And I think that if you could keep A around for a little bit, but I do think that once you realize that you can provide your emotional validation, you can get that from your friends, your community, from people around you, like, have more friends. Like, it doesn't always have to be someone you're dating. And I think once you do that, you will then look at the relationship with A and you'll be like, actually, you weren't even that good of a friend, so maybe nah. That's kind of like my best advice to sum up really quickly. Get rid of C. No with C. Seek multiple fulfilling relationships rather than collecting multiple unfulfilling relationships until you reach some sort of stasis. It's not what I think polyamory should be about. Focus on yourself. Be okay with being alone. Be okay with finding emotional support in people that aren't immediately romantically connected to you. Value your friendships more. And seek polyamory friendly therapy if you have access to that. And be okay with being alone, because I do think that unless you have flexible schedules with 5 to 7 partners on the go, or your life is set up in a completely different way, you're gonna have to sometimes be okay with being alone. And I think more people, monogamous people even in general, need to be okay with being alone, because when you're not okay with being alone, then you stay in relationships that you shouldn't. So I hope that helps, and good luck. Thank you for listening to episode 48 of Non-Monogamy Help. If you want to be awesome, you can donate to our Patreon. Donating $5 or more a month means that your name with your permission will be read at the end of the podcast. This week's current patrons are Laura Boylan, Chris Albury-Jones, Juke, Kia, and James Wartell. If for whatever reason you can't become a patron because life happens, and that's absolutely fine, if you could take 5 minutes and go to iTunes, find the podcast, rate and review it, that would be extremely helpful. I'd really, really appreciate it. It helps me get the podcast out to people just by all of those rankings. I don't know how it works. It's helpful. Please do it if you can. You don't have to write a review. You can just do a rating if you'd like. It'll take you 2 seconds. So if you can do that, that'd be awesome. That's all for this week. You will get a new column next Friday and another podcast episode in a fortnight. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to Non-Monogamy Help. Our podcast music has been provided by Chris Albury-Jones at albury-jones.com, and the art was made by Dom Jung at domduong.com. Thank you for listening.